Look, Raccoon, maybe that mask you're wearing is obstructing your view, but if you haven't noticed, I'm a skunk.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado.
And I am Dan Simon, also broadcasting live, but not from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame, but rather the Studio Simon headquarters here in Louisville, Kentucky, home of the fastest 2 minutes in sports, the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory, and birthplace of Muhammad Ali, who at the time was known as Cassius Clay. Great city.
And the Ali Center, which is a fantastic museum for you. Man, you can build a great sports weekend in Louisville, Kentucky.
Did you go to the Ali Center when you were here on your baseball palooza?
We did. And in fact, the first time you and I ever met in person, it was after we walked directly from the Ali Center to the little bar attached to the Louisville Bats ballpark there, where we had a beer, and then took in a Bats ball game as part of Baseball Palooza several years ago. That's hard to believe. That was the first time we met in person because we've hung out in person so many times since then.
Yeah, it was a start of a lot of good times together.
Absolutely. So, and many more to come. Dan, we're going to be talking about the Hudson Valley Renegades, one of your brands. You are responsible for their current iteration of their brand. They're a high A affiliate of your New York Yankees, and they play in Fishkill, New York. So you'll be on again later on in this episode to talk about the work that you did on that brand, and then of course with a Studio Simon Stumper. But in the meantime, this is a team from your native New York. One of my main questions for you about this, Dan, is just as we sort of launch into the episode here, what is it with minor league baseball and raccoons? There are 120 affiliated minor league baseball teams, and 3 of them have raccoon-based brands.
That's not really a lot. Let's do the math. What's 3 divided by 120? 2.5%.
I'd be curious to know what other animals are better represented than raccoons in affiliated minor league baseball.
Okay, now we can do this sort of off the top of our heads. I'm going to say, well, there's certainly a fair amount of dogs.
Yeah, there's dogs. There's bears, probably.
Bears and cats, or birds. Now, not a specific breed of right. Bird, type of bird.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about, well, a raccoon's a raccoon. There are not like a bunch of different kinds of raccoons.
Yeah.
There are lots of different dogs, cats, and I would say birds. If we're looking at it as birds in general, as opposed to
but then that would be
birds or raptors or
I think we'd have to talk about specific kind of birds there because raccoons are just mammals, right? Like, so you can't just say, well, mammals versus birds. I would like the listeners of this podcast to be our crack research squad and get back to us on this. But Dan, you're going to be back later on in this episode to talk about the work that you did on this brand, and then you're going to be back with a Studio Simon Stumper. On this episode, we're going to have Will Young with the Hudson Valley Renegades. We'll talk to him next. And then Ranger Amy is going to be here to talk about raccoons. So maybe I can save some of these questions for Ranger Amy. In the meantime, we'll get to the interviews, and I'll see you again for the segment, and I'll see you at the end of the episode.
Okay. Well, I'll be right back for that interview, and then I'll be back again.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
I am so pleased to have Will Young, who is the assistant GM with the Hudson Valley Renegades on Baseball by Design. Will, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Paul. I'm great. How are you?
Well, we're recording this in May right now, and you are wearing what looks to be like a fairly heavy jacket. What's going on with the weather in Hudson Valley right now?
It is pouring rain.
Right.
We it seems to happen where every weekend we get pouring rain. As an avid golfer, it's not the best, but it just always that's how the chips fall.
I get it. You're in a beautiful part of the country outside of New York City, New York. Is it technically upstate? Are you upstate New York?
Oh, you're going to open a can of worms with that question. It depends on who you ask. If you
All right.
people from the Bronx, we're upstate. If you
Yeah.
ask people from here, oh, it's a curse to say that we're upstate. So as a non-New Yorker, my objective opinion is that we're not in upstate New York.
You're
I
not
think
upstate.
upstate New York is in Albany.
You're certainly not in the city of New York. You
Correct.
are in the
Yeah.
state of New York. The Hudson Valley Renegades are one of three affiliated minor league baseball teams that have a raccoon-based brand. But, the name Renegades has nothing to do with raccoons. Why are you guys called the Renegades?
It really came down to the community. So when the Renegades were first founded back in 1994, there's a strong community support to make this happen. Really came to fruition because of the community of all the support we got for having a professional team here. And it came down to it was a city hall meeting of, how are we gonna get a professional team here? And the city rallied around the name, the Renegades, of, being trendsetters, being somebody who breaks the norm, and that's what we try to go with every single day while we still do it 31 years later. But it really came from the community.
You all have had a number of rebrands. You've always had the raccoon-based brand, but the colors have changed. The actual design has changed. Sometimes it's just been the tail. Sometimes it's been the face. What's the story behind that? That number of revisions over the years. I think it's been 5 different brands.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason is based on the affiliate that we have. So when we started, we were a Rangers affiliate for the first 11 years. Then we became a Rays affiliate for the next 17 years. Then coming out of COVID in 2021, that was when the major minor league baseball reimagining happened with MLB. We became a Yankees affiliate. So really, it boiled down to when we were a Rangers affiliate, we looked a certain way. When we were a Rays affiliate, we looked a certain way. And now that we're a Yankees affiliate, we look a certain way. But as you mentioned, it all boils back down to the raccoon. We have a mascot family of 5 different mascots: a grandpa, a mom, dad, and then a son, and now the son's wife. So we're very, we have a big backstory with our mascots, and we always stay true to that.
Oh, that's funny. I do notice that the current brand, at least as it's listed on the sportslogos.net website, the current brand is the first one that you all have had that doesn't feature that raccoon in the actual primary logo. You have a bridge, which I'm assuming is a famous bridge, and I can ask you about that. But you've got the bridge and the river and the landscape there, and then some Yankees pinstriping. What was the thinking behind going away from the raccoon, at least in the primary logo?
Yeah, so that logo, its first iteration, don't know the exact year, around 2016, 2017 was the first time that logo came into play. So that's actually the Newburgh Beacon Bridge, which our stadium is 4 minutes off the Newburgh Beacon Bridge,
Nice.
over the Hudson River. So the first iteration of that logo had kind of Tampa Bay Rays blue, which is a very sky blue, river blue color that goes really well with that. And then with the Yankees, it obviously fit really well to put those pinstripes in there to kind of replace that light blue with only the river running down the bottom. But it was more of a, instead of the mascot being the focal point, it was the landscape being the focal point, which everybody in the Hudson Valley knows about. Obviously, the Hudson River, and then there's the Poughkeepsie, the walkway over the Hudson, which is in Poughkeepsie, which is another bridge. But the Newburgh Beacon Bridge is the one that really connects. You can get to Danbury, Connecticut. You can get to Scranton, Pennsylvania, going over that, 84, going over that road. So
When I wrote about this team back in 2016, I spoke with Vice President Rick Zolzer, and he talked a lot about the nickname having its roots, its origins in the Revolutionary War history in Hudson Valley. Is that something you all still talk about when you talk about the origin of the team name?
yeah, absolutely. So when you go over across the river to Newburgh, which is 10 minutes away, there's a fort of George Washington's there. When we talk about, I know we're going to talk about the Big Apples, but one of the reasons we chose the Big Apples as an alternate identity is the U.S. Constitution was ratified in Poughkeepsie, to make New York a state in 1788. So there's a lot of history, especially around the Revolutionary War here, that goes with the name of the team. And again, it's rooted in the community, it's rooted in the history of the community, it's rooted in what the community is now, but definitely something that we still think about.
Will, before I get away from the primary brand and the raccoons and the renegades, and we get into some of those alternates that you're talking about, do those 5 mascots of yours, and that's a lot of mascots, do those 5 mascots have names?
They all do. So Rufus is our grandpa. Rookie is the original mascot from 1994. He married Renee, who
Oh,
came in 1995. they had Rascal, who was their kid who came around in 1999 or 2000, one of the two. And then we, and as part of my tenure, introduced Rosie, who is a skunk, who was the first non-raccoon of the family, and they got married last year.
Oh, so there's a raccoon skunk marriage in the
And it,
family of mascots.
yes, it was
All right.
very controversial,
Yeah,
but
was that scandalous?
the parents approved.
That's like when my Irish Catholic mother married my Italian Catholic father. It was a huge scandal in Philadelphia. These alternate brands, let's start with the newest one because it's fun and
Mhm.
it made a splash. The Big Apples you were talking about already, so I'll just ask you what's the Big Apples brand about?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's in the name, right? It's, New York. New York is the Big Apple, and we want to tie in those roots to the city as well as up here in the Hudson Valley. So, if anybody who's been to the Hudson Valley knows about the apple orchard culture, the production of apples in New York State and in Hudson Valley specifically. But the Big Apple is New York City, and apple orchards are all about the Hudson Valley. New York State is the second largest producer of apples in the United States, which, not many people think of New York as farmland. That's not what people think of New York as. They think of it as New York City, but there's so much more to it. And that's really what we're trying to convey is while we have that connection to New York City, we also have that connection to the rest of the state of New York too.
Fishkill, New York is about 60 miles from Yankee Stadium. I'm curious, because you are not in the city, but you are obviously affiliated with the Yankees. How much of a connection do the people of Fishkill, New York, feel to the city of New York City?
I think it goes both ways. There's a train. The MTA goes right from there's a train stop in Beacon, which is 5 minutes away, which is an hour train ride to the city. So there's definitely a connection there. We have a large population of commuters who work in the city. I know somebody personally who every day hops on the train and takes an hour train down to the city. So there's definitely that connection there. There is, however, we're far enough away from the city as well, where there is the community here that is a completely separate community from the city. The Hudson Valley is beautiful. It's a beautiful area. There's so much nature. There's so many things to do outside and kind of getting away from the concrete jungle that is New York. So there is also kind of that in the same vein of there's a lot of people from the Hudson Valley that go into the city every day. There's a lot of people from the city that come up here every day that are just looking to get away and walk around and take a hike or walk over the river, anything like that.
Another really fun alternate brand that came out in the last couple of years, came out in 2022. I guess that's more than a couple of years away now, but the cider donuts is a fun one. And I think anyone who has lived anywhere where fall is important knows what a cider donut is. But, obviously this apple culture and being in the Northeast, cider donuts was important. What was that brand about?
Yeah, that one was really fun. One of the things we've seen just in general across minor league baseball is people love food. People love food rebrands. They love talking about the food of their area and the food of our area. It's all about fall. It's all about, those apple orchards and going to fall festivals and fairs and things like that. And the keystone item is a cider donut when you're going to, when it's cool, it's 50 degrees, when you're walking around in October, what do you want more than a nice fresh cider donut? And again, there are probably 25, 30 apple orchards within 30 minutes of our stadium. It's all over. So you could go to a different one every weekend for a fall and you get through half of them. So really, we wanted to tie into what is the food culture here, and that's a big piece of the food culture here.
Honestly, there's nothing quite like fall in the Northeast. I don't care what anyone says. I live in Colorado. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. There's nothing like fall in the Northeast. This cider donut character, Dusty the Donut, he's carrying an old timey jug
Yep.
of cider, and I don't want to project on him here. And it's only 8 o'clock in the morning in Colorado as we're having this conversation, but he looks a little tipsy. Is the suggestion that that's not non-alcoholic cider in that jug, or are you at liberty to say?
No, it is. It's non-alcoholic cider. It's for the whole family. We just his whole thing. The thing about Dusty is he's a fun-loving guy. He wants to run around. He wants to jump in the pile of leaves. He wants to drink his cider and throw a baseball and roll around the ballpark. So he's active. That's what we'll say. That's what we were going for. Is he's a very active guy, and it's mostly for the kids. It's Dusty's all about. We have plushies of Dusty in our team
Nice.
store that sell out every single year whenever we order them. So the kids love them. They have a lot of fun with them. So
I want a Dusty plushie. That sounds great. Is
they're
that
pretty great.
well, speaking of soft, lovable creatures, another one of your alternate identities that came out this year is the Retrievers. And you have a golden retriever looking logo there with that. Obviously, the colors, all the branding around a golden retriever. Why did you all play as the Retrievers?
That really comes down to, I mean, obviously dogs resonate with anyone anywhere, and almost anyone anywhere. Most people are dog lovers, but really it came down to us as a front office. We were thinking about, hey, what can we do that resonates with the community, that resonates with us, and everybody here loves dogs. And so we said, what's better than a dog identity? Every Sunday we have Bark in the Park, where we allow dogs to come in every Sunday. They get to run the bases after the game with the kids and everything. So we have a lot of fun with it. But we wanted to tie that into how can we grow that? How can we do more than that? And having this identity is really great. We have a great partner in the Brothers That Just Do Gutters. They're the presenting sponsor of this identity as well. They're deeply rooted in the community, and also they have a dog named Tank, which is a retriever that they have, which has been in some promos for us too. But it's really, we're all about having fun. We're all about the community, and this tied in really well to both of them. There's not really a deeper meaning other than we all love dogs.
Everybody loves dogs. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of fun to just see like, nah, everyone loves a golden retriever, right? Like, who doesn't love a golden retriever? We're putting it on a logo.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
we may or may not have a bat dog. I won't reveal that yet, but June
oh,
15th is our first day as the Retrievers. It's also Father's Day, so going to be a great day at the ballpark, and we're working on some fun things for that day too.
I'll have to check my rundown here and see when the plan is to drop this episode. It may be right around then, so
There
we'll
you go.
stay tuned. Or if this comes out after June 15, go back and check it out.
Sounds
So
good.
see what the news is there. One of the other identities that I know that you all do that you are proud of is that you do a brand for minor league baseball's The Nine program. What is that brand?
Yeah, so we have the Newburgh Gorhams is what we rebrand ourselves as. They were a Negro League team founded back in the 1800s. A really cool story. They were one of the oldest teams, one of the first teams to be in the Negro Leagues, and they are the only Negro League team to ever be viewed by a sitting president.
Oh,
Back in, again, late 1800s, they had a 43 game winning streak at one point. We're one of the most successful teams in the Negro Leagues, and we're right across the river from us. So not a ton of people know about the history of that team, and it's been really great to be able to tell that story to the Hudson Valley. Of it's kind of gone by the wayside as it was 125 years ago that this team was around, but we get the opportunity to work with the local community, tell that story of who they are and what they accomplished and how important they were, not only to Hudson Valley but to baseball in general. And it's been great to tell that story over the last couple of years.
it's such an important part of the local community's heritage for sure. One of the challenges I would imagine with a team from that long ago, any team from that long ago, is recreating or envisioning some kind of brand for it. I'm sure there weren't photos. I'm sure there weren't logos specifically because there so often weren't in that era. How did you create, the branding and the uniform set for that team?
Yeah, we were able to find literal newspaper clippings of it. That is what we went based off of. It was,
Wow.
they were all digitized at that point in our local libraries and things like that. But we went through newspaper clippings from the 1800s that had details about it. I believe we were able to find grainy photos of what they looked like, and we recreated it the best we could. The logo specifically, we definitely found, again, grainy photos of this is what it looked like.
Hmm.
And then everything else was envisioned based off of, it was a black and white logo. It was a black and white jersey that's had Newburgh Gorhams across it in this type of font. And
Yeah,
so we were able to, use the context clues and the images that we had, whatever quality they were, to be able to say this is the best recreation we could possibly have.
very cool. All right. Well, before I let you go, I do need to mention that for listeners of this podcast, they know that I collect the ice cream helmets, the Sunday helmets. The Renegades do a great job. The Renegades have a number of different sort of versions of, or have had over the years anyway, a number of different versions of the helmet. So for a collector like me, it's fun to have multiple Renegades helmets in my collection. Do you have any new versions coming out anytime soon?
That's a great question. I know we have our normal HV tail logo that comes in an ice cream helmet, but we also have Dusty the donut as an ice cream helmet. So
Oh,
those are the two that I know about. So
I have not seen that one in the wild yet. I may have to see if any of my fellow collectors have found that one. Will, one last question for you. Quad Cities River Bandits, Rocket City Trash Pandas, Hudson Valley Renegades, who wins a fight?
I mean, I think when we have five mascots coming against their one, I think
Yeah.
it's a pretty easy question. The Renegades win every day.
I mean, the Trash Pandas have that, the shield of the trash can there. The River
They do.
Bandits, yeah, they're
The
they're
shield, a
the
shield blocks Rosie, but then Rascal and Rookie come in from the sides and
yeah,
take him down.
like Velociraptors, absolutely. Will, this has been a ton of fun. Where can people find you, and where can people find the team online, on social media, that sort of thing?
Yeah, HV Renegades, everywhere you can find it. HVRenegades.com, HV Renegades on X, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you find it. Me, you can find me walking around the stadium. That's where you find me.
Go to a Hudson Valley Renegades and say hi to Will, say hi to the five mascots, and don't pick a fight with him, it sounds like. Will, thanks so
again,
much.
Paul. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Friend of the podcast, practically a co-host at this point, my good friend, Dan Simon, designer extraordinaire, who has done so much work in the world of minor league baseball, including this here Hudson Valley Renegades brand. Dan, good morning. Hello. I know we've already chatted, but let me ask you again. How are you?
Hello to you, Paul Caputo. I am fantastic. How are you?
Well, I'm very excited to be talking about your Hudson Valley Renegades. This is a really fun brand that's had a lot of different iterations over the years, and the current primary brand is actually the only one, I think, in their history that does not feature the raccoon as the main primary identity. It's a Hudson Valley scene that is the primary logo instead of the raccoon. What was the thinking there in moving away from the raccoon for their current iteration of this brand?
The thinking was the club's thinking, and I can't explain the whys and wherefores. I can only tell you what they told me, which was they're moving away from the raccoon. That the Hudson Valley Renegades brand identity was the second minor league baseball, frankly, professional sports brand identity I ever created. So that the original logo I did for them, which is not in use anymore, was done it was for the 1994 season. So that means it was done, I guess, in late 1993, which featured a raccoon. I then did a brand update for them some years after. They then did an in-house brand update, and then I subsequently did another brand update. So I've actually worked on their main, their principal brand identity. I was going to say, if you were counting along as I was listing those things off, I was going to say 3 times, but technically it's actually 4 times because we also did, frankly, it was just one logo when we were Yankeeizing the identity when the team started as what were they? I say you're trying to get my attention to say
Well,
something, so please go ahead.
I can tell you, Dan, that Wikipedia tells us that it was the Rangers, briefly, the Texas Rangers, from 1994 to 1995, and then the Devil Rays / Rays from 96 all the way till 2020.
And then in 2020, they became a Yankee affiliate with the shakeup, contraction, decimation of minor league baseball. And what the team wanted to do was add an HV logo that looked like the Yankees NY logo. And even though this is an audio medium. For those of you who, well, none of you are following along on.
Well, I
Um,
am, Dan. I can see what you're
okay,
wearing.
I am wearing a hat bearing that logo. Interestingly, when the logo was done, they had the blessing of the New York Yankees to do it. And then something happened. I do not know what. And that blessing was rescinded. And then something else happened. The blessing was re-granted. So I can now wear the hat. It's no longer being kept under wraps. So yeah, I've been worked on this brand identity more than a handful of times.
So the first brand that you did for them, way back in the 90s had this like really like sort of fun, mischievous raccoon character, with just he was wearing a baseball cap and very, very 90s cutesy, appropriate, of its era for sure. That's a really fun one. We will not speak of the brand that they went to when they did something in-house, but then back in 2018, you were involved with the brand where it did still feature the raccoon. The raccoon is still in the brand; it's still there, but it was with the 2021 season, the brand that you did in 2020, that where you say they Yankees-ized it. That brand is very interesting to me because it's sort of an idyllic scene, right? Like you've got this bridge and you've got the river, you see the actual valley. There's the shape of home plate, and then the sky actually has the Yankees pinstripes. It's all very idyllic. It's cool colors. So far as sports branding goes, it's not like super in your face, like we're gonna beat you. It's more in terms of the color choices, in terms of the sort of idyllic scenery. It's a much more sort of peaceful scene. So, what was the club's intention in terms of what they wanted to do with their brand when they went with this rather than like an in your face sports brand, going with that idyllic scene?
My answer to that question, Paul, is frankly going to be based on speculation. Obviously, I had discussions with the team about what they were trying to achieve, but they didn't necessarily tell me why. Same reason as mentioned before. I just do what I'm told. But as far as speculation goes, they, as we have mentioned, became a Yankees affiliate. And think about how the Yankees brand is.
Hmm.
It is they've had one cap logo. Now, frankly, it morphed a little bit over time, but even the current logo has existed for 100 years. I couldn't tell you exactly when the current iteration of the logo was first used, but it's probably at least 100 years old. And that hasn't changed. They haven't added anything. I remember back when Major League Baseball did the turn ahead the clock uniforms. Do you remember that? Where
Oh
they
yeah.
were kind of like some space age uniforms. The Mets even played, instead of as the New York Mets, they were the Mercury Mets, like they would be playing on the planet Mercury. Um, and the Yankees did not participate
No.
in that program. And when the Yankees were asked why they did not go with these futuristic uniforms, their answer was whatever year this was supposed to take place, probably it could have been like 2020 or something. This was done back in the 1990s. And so whatever year they were supposed to represent these futuristic uniforms, 2020, 2030, 2040, whatever it was, they said the way our uniforms look now is the way our uniforms are going to look then. So, the Yankees uniforms, I think, if one word you could use for them is maybe understated. They're certainly traditional. There's no, they're the Yankees. Up
Yeah.
until this year, you couldn't even have a beard. Um, and I think what the Renegades were doing was they were viewing their brand identity, or what they were going to do with their brand identity is we're going to I used the word before, we're going to Yankeeize it, not just
Mhm.
visually, but everything. We're going to be, we're the Hudson Valley Renegades, but you might as well be the Hudson Valley Yankees.
And so the current brand that you did that is Yankeeized does, it essentially builds off of or tweaks the one that you did, the sort of full rebrand that you did for the 2018 season, like I said, which has the same idyllic scene, but not the Yankees pinstripes. It still does have the raccoon character in there. Am I right in thinking that the raccoon is still there in some ways, right? Like the raccoon still exists as part of their brand, yes?
Yes, it does still exist. As a matter of fact, they have a number of different mascots that are all, well, I was going to say they're all raccoons. There's, I think, three raccoons and a skunk. Okay, there's a skunk in there for some reason. So the raccoons exist in that manner,
Right.
but also there is a modicum of raccoon left in the visual assets. One of the reasons for that is they had a artificial turf field installed several years ago. I couldn't tell you how many years ago. And in center field, as part of that artificial turf, is the HV logo with the raccoon tail coming off of it. So that couldn't be removed. It's on the field. So they kept the HV logo with the raccoon tail in as part of the system. And I think it still is worn as an on-field cap. I couldn't tell you that for certain.
The one that you're wearing right now is the Yankee-esque interlocking HV. The team describes it as the Hudson Line Collection, and it is meant to. It says it connects our Hudson Valley communities from Poughkeepsie down to Yankee Stadium in New York City. So it is, it's a great tie to the Yankees ball club. And I would imagine if you were wearing it in Yankee Stadium and people weren't looking closely, they would just think you were wearing a Yankees hat.
Even if they are looking closely, I have worn this hat out in the wild, and people say, "Go Yankees."
Now you still have the sticker on it, Dan. What's the thinking there? Is that you trying to be cool like the kids?
That's what the kids do. Yeah, I'm still a kid.
All right, Dan, one last question here for you. This team's called the Renegades, which is, to my knowledge, not a nickname for a raccoon. How come they're a raccoon if they're the Renegades?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked.
I'm really good at questions, Dan.
Okay, when doing a brand identity, when I am tasked with helping teams come up with a name, a theme for their brand identity, one of the most important considerations for me is, does this theme provide me with fodder for developing a fully fleshed out brand identity system? Like how am I going to visually represent this theme, this idea, this animal? If you have a team called the Burlington Bees, you're going to have bee logos. Now, Hudson Valley was naming the team. By the way, they were the Erie Sailors of Erie, Pennsylvania, where we now have the Erie Seawolves. At the time, the Sailors were a short season New York Penn League team. And that team was purchased by the Gold Clan Group and moved to Hudson Valley, where they were getting a brand new stadium built for them. And they came to me with two names that they were trying to decide between. The two names were the Hudson Valley Renegades and the Hudson Valley Vipers.
Mm.
Is Hudson Valley known for snakes? I am sure there are snakes there, but it's not like one immediately associates Hudson Valley with snakes or snakes with Hudson Valley. But they liked the way it sounded, the alliteration. And also back then, it's 30 years ago we're talking about, the thought that goes into branding a team was not what it is today.
For sure.
And the other name was Renegades. Ultimately, they, as we all know now, they chose the Renegades. And I said, great, what is a renegade? And they kind of looked at each other, looked at me and said, we haven't thought about that. And I said, okay, well, what can it be? and they threw out a number of things. The Hudson Valley was the site of a number of, maybe numerous, Revolutionary War battles.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of, Minutemen was one. You could say they are renegades because they are going against the mother country, England. So that was one of the things that they thought of. Trying to think of what might have been another one. But frankly, they didn't have a lot, but we did a logo that featured a Minuteman. We did that, and then they kind of looked in and go, nah, we don't want to be Minutemen. So then their idea was, we want it to be an animal. And I said, great, what kind of animal? And they could not think of what kind of animal would represent Renegades. So they said, let's do an animal that's not any specific animal.
Oh,
And I said, what?
yeah.
They
That's like
said,
the Washington Wild Things. The Washington Wild Things in Pennsylvania. Their animal is indeterminate animal.
right. So that's what they wanted. And you would think that's an easy thing to do, just like do anything you want.
Right.
But anytime you do something like that, I've been tasked with doing that twice, and both times, whatever you do, somebody's going to look at it and say, oh, that's some type of cat, or that's some
Right.
type of bear, or that's some type of dog.
Right.
So when I did this indeterminate animal, it went through a couple of different iterations, but they were saying, like, the second to last one before they ultimately chose one, it's kind of, they thought, looked like a wolf. I wasn't trying to make it look like a wolf, but again, it's going to have something about it that reminds you of one animal or another. And then somebody said, and I don't remember who it was, but it was on the client side. Somebody said, if we put a mask on it, it'll look like a raccoon. And I said, yes, it will. And they said, please put a mask on it. And I put a mask on it. It looked like a raccoon. And they said, we're done. And then when the identity was unveiled, they did a T-shirt that had the CAP logo on it, which featured the raccoon, and put a dictionary definition underneath it. It said, the word being defined was raccoon.
Yeah.
And then the definition was the definition of a renegade, not a raccoon. Raccoons are, they're scavengers.
Sure.
And I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but it described a renegade. And I'm thinking, okay, if that's, if that's how you want to convince people that a raccoon is a renegade, fine. And I had that T-shirt. I probably wore it, but that was years ago. No longer have it. And that's the story of why the Hudson Valley Renegades were, and to a lesser degree still are, represented by a raccoon.
Well, that original brand, and as you were telling this story, I was looking at the original brand to sort of see, how it could have been these other animals. It's a really fun brand. I really like it, and I don't know if the team ever trots it back out for retro nights or whatever. Obviously it's the contemporary work that you've done on the existing brand is much more appropriate these days. But it would be fun to trot out that old retro raccoon that you came up with way back when. That's a fun one.
It was trotted out.
Oh, good.
For their 25th anniversary season, they brought that logo back. I remember for certain I recolored it to have the current coloration.
Nice.
The Yankee colors, it had navy blue and gray, frankly. It was worn on field. I think they may have even brought back the original lettering as well.
When you talked about Yankeesizing it, that was something we didn't even really talk about, is that the black elements went to the Yankees very, very, very dark blue that a lot of people think is black.
Yes, it did.
Dan, what a fun one. What a fun conversation. And raccoons are fun. This is a fun brand. And Dan, it's always fun to talk to you. Hey, we'll see you in a little bit for the Studio Simon Stumper after we check in with Ranger Amy about raccoons.
Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing what Ranger Amy has to say about these trash pandas.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking forward to giving you a Hudson Valley Renegade themed stumper. So see you in a little bit.
See you for your third appearance on this episode very shortly.
Baseball by Design listeners worldwide, it is my honor to introduce to you the official Baseball by Design wildlife correspondent, musical enthusiast, and national anthem extraordinaire, Ranger Amy Burnett.
Wildlife correspondent Ranger Amy Burnett. We're doing an episode here on raccoons. What makes them such a great baseball mascot? Why would a raccoon be a good baseball player?
I think a raccoon would be an awesome baseball player because they're just so adaptable. I mean, they live anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the country you could possibly imagine raccoons live. So when I lived in Phoenix, people were always like, I saw what I thought looked like a raccoon, but we don't have raccoons here. And so I heard that like so many times during the year. I'm like, yeah, we have raccoons.
I think the perception of raccoons is that they're like little, fuzzy, evil people. Because they've got like the opposable thumbs.
Yeah, well, they're not really opposable though.
Okay, let's talk about thumbs.
Yeah, they don't have the opposable thumbs that you think they do.
Oh.
They have a hand-like print, but they're not as like dexterous as you think. But they do sort of use their hands in a human-like way when they wash their food. It's called dousing. But I found out that not a lot of raccoons in the wild do this as much as ones in captivity. They like wash their food.
Oh.
So maybe it's just one of those things where like, well, they feel like they need to sort of do something with their food, but they use their hands are their most sensitive part of their body, and their hands are their most sensitive sense for the raccoon. Like it's stronger than the sense of smells and the sight and the hearing. So if they're nocturnal, right? So they're like taking their hands and like in the water because they're mostly near water areas, and they're looking with their hands in the water to grab things like crayfish and like little invertebrates in the water and eating them. So if you're a raccoon and you're a baseball player, you probably are very good at catching the ball. Their hands are so sensitive to touch that they would be great at grasping and catching, and they would be very aware of where the ball was all the time.
It almost feels like they would make a good pitcher, right? Because they would have such a good feel for the ball.
Oh, that's a good
They
idea.
could like position their hands differently on the ball and throw it a little better, even without the traditional opposable thumbs that most pitchers have.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
Okay.
But some of the names for raccoon come from this habit of sort of washing their food, or what people call washing their food. But they're not washing it. It's not dirty. It's just that they're just sort of feeling it, make sure it's okay.
I don't think most baseball players are washing their food either.
No, but I'm talking about raccoons, most people. But the name comes from things about washing, because the French, and I'm going to have you read this word, means washing rat. They're not rats. They're not rodents, but
The word that you are asking me to pronounce, the term, actually, it's two words. It's raton laveur.
oh, very good. I'm so glad I didn't try to pronounce that. I would have said raton laveur, and that means washing rat.
Right. You know, it when it washes its food, it's probably not like battling other animals for that food, right? So would you say it's more a lover than a fighter?
Oh my God. That was so bad. You're going to edit that out, right?
I spent too much time with Pat Larson of the Minor League Baseball Hat History Series this past weekend, and the jokes are still there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's a laver, not a fighter.
Oh boy. I'm so sorry, those of you who are listening. But one more last thing about the word raccoon. It comes from a native Powhatan, meaning animal that scratches with its hands. So they were one of the first animals to be described by the explorers. But yeah, so raccoons they're cool animals. I was wondering, like, why do they have this bandit look about them? Like, what would be
a mask? They're wearing a mask.
Be the point of having a mask?
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Why do
you
they
ever
look like they're
see-
wearing a mask?
What about sport? Like, have you ever seen sports players with like the black underneath their eyes?
The eye black, absolutely.
They actually use it to sort of reflect and not have glare in their eyes. So
The same reason baseball players do it.
baseball players do it,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
All right.
so raccoons have that sort of.
So they evolved
mask.
eye black.
They evolved it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just think it makes them look cute. raccoons live, like I said, just about anywhere, but they're adapted to where they live. So in Florida, you're going to find little skinny raccoons, and in like cold climates, in Colorado where we are, raccoons are going to be big and more buff and more, thick than the ones down in Florida.
In general, raccoons are adorable, but they're kind of evil little bastards, right? Like they're always like getting into chicken coops and they're
Do you think they're evil, or are they just opportunistic and
well,
cunning?
obviously, if they're a nuisance to people who are trying to keep a chicken coop, they consider them evil. Evil is in the eye of the beholder.
Or in the hand of the beholder.
Or in the hand of the beholder. All right, Ranger Amy, one last question for you because I happen to know this is true. You had a pet raccoon when you were a little girl.
I did. Yeah, his name was Bandito.
Of course.
He was so cute. I named him. That's how I know what he sounds like. He was like, but he would come to my pool party.
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, he would like stick his hands in the pool, like wash his hands, and then he would like just be a ruckus.
And so it's a really good idea, you think, for people to have raccoons as pets.
Yeah, it was really fun for like a year, and then he turned nasty and started biting, and my dad was like, we're gonna bring him to a place that can do a better job of taking care of him.
And that's how come Ranger Amy, people have not noticed this necessarily because that's an audio podcast. That's how come you have 7 fingers.
Very good. But yeah, I don't recommend it. But they were fun it was fun to have him as a little raccoon when he was a baby, not so much as an adult.
Ranger Amy, we love it when you come by here on the Baseball by Design podcast.
I'm coming by here. Huh?
You stopped by out here on the back porch. We're on the back porch here recording this on a beautiful summer evening.
I hope that people can hear like the crickets and the birds. That'd be kind of fun.
I don't think they can. I think Zoom does a really good job of filtering that stuff out.
That's too bad. Well, Thank you for asking me to come out on the porch and talk about raccoons with you.
Ranger Amy, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. It is time once again for a Studio Simon Stumper. Dan, how you doing?
I am fantastic, thank you. And since you listeners have already heard me ad nauseum, let's get right into this stumper.
Okay, let's do it.
The Hudson Valley Renegades' original mascot was named Rookie, and they later introduced a female mascot named Renee. The two later married and eventually had a son named Rascal, which means that Rookie and Renee were doing you-know-what.
Goodness.
Now, our Studio Simon Stumper today is with regard to Renee. She has a last name. So our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, what was and still is her full name? Is it Renee Raccoon? A, that is, Renee Raccoon. B, Renee D'Amour. Or C, Renee Gaddis, spelled Gades, but pronounced Gaddis.
Huh. All right. Renee Raccoon would be awfully boring if that were the answer. However, did you say their main mascot was called Rocky?
Rookie.
Oh, Rookie. So he could be Rookie Raccoon. And if they were up to no good and there's now a junior raccoon on the scene, Rascal, it would be maybe overly puritanical for us to insist on them being married for that to be the case.
That baby was not born out of wedlock.
All right. So, man, it would be boring if raccoon were the answer. Renee D'Amour would certainly fit the theme of this conversation, amour being the French word for love. D''amour would be Renee of love. And then Renee Gaddis, which I don't know actually what Gaddis means, but I feel like that's the right answer. And so I think raccoon is too boring. Renee D'Amour is kind of fun, but it just doesn't feel right to me. So I'm gonna go Renee Gaddis.
Okay, we ended the last stumper by me mentioning that you were on a run with correct answers, and that streak continues.
Oh,
you are correct. Now, it's kind of interesting that you don't know what Gaddis means because I spelled it out for you.
Gades, yeah.
Right. Now, what happens when you put the name Renee in front of that?
Renegades. How
Okay.
about that?
Okay, well, there's a story to how that became her name. And this is I just actually recently, this is complete coincidence. I didn't even know I was going to be doing a Renegade segment, but I was in conversation with Steve Gliner, the former Renegades general manager and team president, and here's what happened. Before the Renegades ever played a game. This was opening day, whatever, 1994. That's when it was, 1994. Wow, that's 30 years ago, 31 years ago. Up on their video board, they had the word Renegades, but it was broken up into two frames. I don't know the reason why. So Renee, Rene, was in one frame, and Gades was in another frame. And one of the season ticket holders said, within earshot of Hudson Valley Renegade employee, might have been Steve, I don't know who heard this, but said, not as a joke, said, "Who is Renee Gaddis?" Uh, and it obviously tickled them so much that years later, when they introduced this female mascot, they ended up naming her Renee Gaddis.
It's funny because when you spelled it, I almost said like, "Oh, not Gades," and I wonder if I had said that out loud, if I would have heard Renegades. Dan, that is very funny, and I don't know what made me go with that because the other two I had sort of a reason for. I'm just glad the streak's alive, and I'm giving 110%, and good Lord willing, we'll be there at the end of the season.
Okay, for those who didn't get it, that's a reference to Bull Durham. And hey, when I was trying to come up with the not correct answers to this, my first inclination was to one of the names to be Renee Raccoon, and I stand by that as that was a good one to have in
It
there.
was. It was.
You talked about it being a boring name, but the name of their mascot is Rookie. It's
I
not
know.
exactly the
I know.
most.
And he could have been Rookie Raccoon, which would have been a play on Rocky Raccoon, which would have been a little bit. It did give me pause. It
And
just like a
and
raccoon has pause.
I think his name might very well be Rookie Raccoon. But I'm not certain of that. And which would make if Renee Gaddis took his name, she would be Renee Raccoon, but that was not her the name that they announced for her. But for the other wrong answer, I was caught between trying to come up with a name that really could have been her name, which is what I ended up doing, Renee Damour, because I mentioned they ended up getting married, and it makes made her she became a love interest. So that's the where I went, or just a completely random name. And I actually have here on my written notes for this the other name, because as of just before we started recording this, I still wasn't certain which I was going to ask. So if the three, I'm going to tell you what the other one was, and I want to know if your sussing would have been any different with this name. So Renee Raccoon, Renee Gaddis, or Renee Poffenberger.
Poffenberger might have gotten me just because it's silly enough, and Gaddis, I just didn't know what the heck it was until you pointed it out. So
Wait, so
Poffenberger,
you might have gone with Poffenberger?
Poffenberger might have duped me. Yeah.
There was, and that's not a made up name. I happened to notice there was a baseball player. He only played for major league player for 3 years for, I think, the Brooklyn Dodgers and Detroit Tigers back in the, I don't know, 20s, 30s, or 40s, named Boots Poffenberger. What a great name. So I was thinking maybe Renee Poffenberger,
I,
which should have been her name.
I think the next pet I have is going to be named Boots Poffenberger. Especially if it's a puffin, just like we saw at the Georgia Aquarium on our trip.
Puffins are one of the greatest creatures that has ever walked the earth. They kind of and swam.
On
And
on our way out here, Dan, I need to tell you a what I think is a great Ranger Amy story that encapsulates Ranger Amy. we were on our way home from our international trip, and we had a layover in Dublin where I had 2 Guinnesses, which was awesome, even though it was just in the airport. And we encountered this group of septuagenarians, 1070-somethings on their way home from Ireland. And one of them, this woman, was wearing a T-shirt with puffins on it, and she was so jazzed about puffins. And I guess there's puffins at the cliffs of something. There's a place in Ireland that's famous for having puffins, and they had gone there, and she got the T-shirt with the puffins on it, and she was super, super excited. And I asked her about her shirt. I'm like, tell me about the puffins, and she's going on and on about how excited she was, and all of her whole group is like, yeah, it was super cool to see the puffins. And she's like, let me show you a picture. Well, Ranger Amy has been at the restroom this whole time and has not seen how excited this woman was to have seen puffins. And so she's showing off these pictures, and she's like, look at the pictures, and she's showing her whole group, and they're like, yeah, we've seen them. And she shows me, and I'm like, wow, that's a great picture. Super cool to see the puffins at the bottom of the cliffs there. And then she shows Amy, and Amy, ice water in her veins, the assassin, the ranger, comes in, and she sees the picture, and she goes, those aren't puffins. The woman, I thought she was going to cry. Amy just absolutely ruined this woman's day. And she's like, yeah, they're murres. She says they kind of look like puffins, but you can tell that they're murres because, and this woman, she went through all 5 stages of grief in 30 seconds. She was mad, and then she was defensive, and she's like, well, then we're going to have to go back and really see puffin. And I was just like, Amy, why can't you let this poor woman live her life? She was so excited about seeing these puffins, and she never would have known if you hadn't come in and crushed her dreams. So anyway, that's Baseball by Design listeners know that they are getting cold hard facts and only the most sincere wisdom when Ranger Amy comes on, because she does not traffic in misinformation.
Yeah, facts are facts.
Facts are facts. There's no alternative facts on this podcast. Dan, thank you so much for taking so much time with me this week, and we'll see you again next week.
Okay, looking forward to it. I hope the streak continues.
Indeed.